Little House on the Prairie fans are witnessing something that once felt almost impossible. Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson have finally put an end to their decades-long estrangement, reuniting in a moment that is emotional, nostalgic, and deeply personal, a moment that feels just as powerful as any storyline ever written for the Ingalls family. This is not a casual update or a fleeting celebrity headline designed to trend for a day and disappear. This is a full-circle moment rooted in shared history, complicated emotions, and the kind of quiet healing that only comes with time, maturity, and perspective. It is the kind of story that resonates not because it is dramatic, but because it is real. For generations of viewers, Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson were never just actresses playing roles. They were Laura and Mary Ingalls, sisters whose bond felt authentic, raw, and deeply emotional. Little House on the Prairie was not merely a television show. It was a cultural anchor, a moral compass, and a source of comfort for millions of families around the world. From its debut in 1974 until its final episode in 1983, the series became a weekly ritual, a gathering point where families sat together to watch stories about love, hardship, resilience, and faith unfold on screen. The show did not shy away from difficult themes. It addressed poverty in a way that felt honest rather than romanticized. It explored disability through Mary's blindness with a depth and sensitivity rarely seen on television at the time. It confronted loss, grief, illness, prejudice, and the quiet strength required to survive life's hardest moments. At the heart of it all were the Ingalls sisters, whose relationship grounded the show emotionally and gave it its soul. Laura Ingalls was fiery, stubborn, curious, and endlessly passionate. She was impulsive, fiercely loyal, and unafraid to speak her mind, qualities that Melissa Gilbert portrayed with an intensity far beyond her years. Gilbert did not simply play Laura, she lived inside that role, growing up on screen as the character grew up within the story. Mary Ingalls, on the other hand, was gentle, thoughtful, reserved, and deeply compassionate. Melissa Sue Anderson brought a quiet emotional strength to Mary that resonated powerfully with audiences, especially during Mary's most heartbreaking storylines. Her portrayal was subtle, controlled, and profoundly moving. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. Their relationship felt lived in and genuine. The love between Laura and Mary did not feel scripted. It felt real. When they argued, it felt authentic. When they comforted one another, it felt sincere. When tragedy struck, their shared pain felt devastating. To viewers, they were the definition of sisterhood. But off-screen, reality was far more complicated. As child actors, both girls were navigating a world filled with pressure, expectations, and emotional weight, all at an age when most children are still figuring out who they are. Long filming days, intense storylines, public scrutiny, and the responsibility of carrying a wildly successful television series shaped their formative years in very different ways. Melissa Gilbert was deeply immersed in Hollywood life, surrounded by agents, interviews, publicity, and the constant reinforcement of her identity as a star. She became one of the most recognizable child actresses of her generation, a position that came with both privilege and immense pressure. Melissa Sue Anderson, by contrast, was far more introverted and private. She approached her work with seriousness and professionalism, but had little interest in the trappings of fame. While Gilbert leaned into the industry, Anderson kept her distance from it emotionally. She valued privacy, boundaries, and a sense of normalcy that was difficult to maintain in Hollywood. These differences were not flaws, they were simply differences in temperament, personality, and coping mechanisms. Over time, those differences became defining. As the years passed, fans began to notice something unusual. While many cast members from Little House on the Prairie reunited frequently, shared fond memories publicly, and appeared at events, Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson were rarely seen together. Their interactions, when they did occur, were polite but distant. Reunions often felt incomplete without both of them fully engaged. Interviews hinted at emotional separation rather than conflict, and slowly, quietly, speculation grew. Was there resentment? Was there jealousy? Was there a falling out no one wanted to talk about? Or was it something far simpler? Two people who drifted apart without ever finding the right moment to reconnect. The truth, as time would reveal, was far human and far less sensational than rumors suggested. Melissa Gilbert has spoken candidly over the years about the challenges of growing up in the public eye. She has acknowledged that fame complicated her sense of self, her relationships, and her emotional development. Being the face of such a beloved show brought incredible opportunities, but it also came with expectations that were heavy for a child to carry. She has reflected on how those pressures shaped her behavior, her insecurities, and her understanding of connection. Melissa Sue Anderson made a very different choice. As she grew older, she stepped away from Hollywood, choosing a quieter life focused on family and personal fulfillment. Eventually relocating outside the United States, she built a life far removed from the industry that defined her childhood. Her decision was not rooted in bitterness or resentment. It was an act of self-preservation. She chose peace over publicity, privacy over prominence. As adulthood arrived, their paths moved in opposite directions, and sometimes when paths diverge for long enough, distance turns into silence. For decades, the idea of a genuine reunion felt unlikely. Fans hoped, of course, but hope faded as years turned into decades. Careers evolved, families grew, life moved forward. Little House on the Prairie became a cherished piece of television history, replayed endlessly and discovered by new generations, while the real-life relationship between its two central sisters remained unresolved.
There was no public feud to resolve, no dramatic argument to apologize for, just years of separation and an unspoken understanding that something had been left unfinished. Then, quietly and unexpectedly, everything changed. In late 2025, Melissa Gilbert shared a moment that immediately captured the attention of fans. She revealed that Melissa Sue Anderson had attended one of her performances, and what followed was not a brief greeting or a polite exchange. It was hours of genuine connection, long conversations that stretched into the night, shared memories of childhood that only they could truly understand, laughter that came easily, tears that came honestly, reflection that came with maturity. Gilbert described the experience as deeply emotional and profoundly meaningful. She spoke about how no one else in the world truly understands what they went through as children, the pressure, the responsibility, the emotional intensity, the way they understand it together. That shared history, once a quiet barrier between them, became the bridge that brought them back. She emphasized that the reunion was not about reopening old wounds or assigning blame. It was not about who was right or wrong. It was about acknowledging the past with compassion and choosing not to let it dictate the future. It was about recognizing that childhood misunderstandings, shaped by stress and circumstance, do not have to become lifelong regrets. That message resonated instantly and deeply. Fans reacted with overwhelming emotion. Social media filled with memories, clips, and tributes. People shared stories of watching Little House on the Prairie with parents, grandparents, and siblings. They talked about learning life lessons from Laura and Mary, about finding comfort in a show that felt safe and familiar. Many said the reunion felt like closure, not just for the actresses, but for viewers who had carried these characters with them for decades. What made the moment especially powerful was its authenticity. There was no press tour, no coordinated announcement, no attempt to capitalize on nostalgia. It was simply a genuine reconnection between two women who shared a once-in-a-lifetime experience and finally found the space and readiness to honor it together. Melissa Sue Anderson's role in this moment cannot be overstated. Known for her privacy and her limited public appearances, her decision to be present and emotionally engaged speaks volumes. It was not symbolic, it was not performative, it was real, and that sincerity is rare in a world where celebrity narratives are often carefully curated. The timing adds yet another layer of meaning. Interest in Little House on the Prairie has surged once again, with new generations discovering the show and longtime fans revisiting it through adult eyes. Conversations about legacy, cultural impact, and the enduring relevance of its themes are everywhere. At the same time, the real-life sisters at the heart of the story are finding peace, not because anyone demanded it, but because they were finally ready. Melissa Gilbert has spoken about how healing does not always arrive with dramatic gestures or public apologies. Sometimes it comes quietly, in shared laughter, in mutual understanding, in the simple acknowledgement that everyone was doing the best they could with what they had at the time. That realization changes everything. This reunion reframes decades of speculation. It shifts the narrative from feud to distance, from resentment to growth. It reminds us that relationships do not always end because of malice. Sometimes they pause because life pulls people in different directions, and no one knows how to close the gap. For fans, it adds a deeper emotional layer to the show itself. Scenes between Laura and Mary now carry added weight, knowing that the bond portrayed on screen eventually found its way back in real life. It enriches the legacy of the series, making it feel even more timeless and meaningful. As of now, there is no indication of joint projects, interviews, or public appearances, and that's exactly what makes this reunion feel so genuine. It wasn't orchestrated for attention, it wasn't designed to sell nostalgia, it was simply two people choosing connection over distance. And maybe that's why this story matters so much. In an era defined by division, grudges, and public fallouts, this reunion is a reminder that time does not only take things away, it also gives clarity. It softens old wounds. It allows people to see each other without the weight of who they once were. Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson did not erase the past. They acknowledged it, respected it, and chose to move forward together. In doing so, they gave fans something rare and deeply meaningful, a real, unscripted ending filled with grace, understanding, and hope. For those who grew up with Little House on the Prairie, this moment feels like coming home, not to Walnut Grove, but to the belief that healing is always possible, no matter how much time has passed. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.